All right, here we go. We are live from Imperial Pizza in South Buffalo. I am joined by Lance Lysowski of the Buffalo News. Tell you what, first time I've done a lot of these shows here, Lance. It is just too damn nice outside.
It is. That's why we're out here.
Yeah, it is too nice. We are
couldn't
outside.
think of better weather. We got a little bit of wind. We got a little bit of noise from the street, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
It is. Good to have you, man. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, Pat.
You're I don't know if you know this now. You are officially a member of the 5-time club here on Talking Buffalo. This is the 5th time that I've had you on.
Okay.
We've done
a pleasure.
5th time altogether.
Yeah.
Our 2nd time at a actual location. First time you and I did Beltline Brewery together.
Good spot. Good spot. Completely different from this. This is my first time at Imperial, but I love it.
Yeah.
So great spot.
Beltline was good. This place is great here in South Buffalo. I got a little bit of I got to let everybody know. Lance is powering through, which I appreciate you even being here. Lance has been a little bit under the weather all day.
Yeah.
Kind enough to join us. Didn't get to eat some wings. Did not get to enjoy the wings.
There will be next time, though. There will be next
time. I did. I had some. And Josh Barnett, by the way, shout out.
Yeah.
From the Buffalo News is here. Banged out some hot Chivetta charred wings and some hot garlic parm wings. Both very good. What are your impressions here? Like I said, this is your first time here being in Imperial Pizza.
Love the patio. I had no idea what to expect. I actually dropped one of my friends off here who's from Chicago last year. He was staying down in this area for work, so I dropped him off here. He just wanted to get a bite to eat. I got a text 2.5 hours later that he just said how much he loved the place. So, yeah, it didn't surprise me at all that you started recording live episodes here. That's for sure.
It's a great spot. They treat us very well here. Good food, good atmosphere, good vibe. Nice bar. Not that busy because it's the summertime, man. People are out enjoying themselves. Now, you live, last time we talked, you were in Allentown, I believe.
Yeah, I was in Allentown my first few years here, and now I'm in North Buffalo. Sort of the Parkside Hurdle area.
You like North Buffalo?
I do. I miss the city. I miss that city feeling. I loved Allentown, but I just didn't no longer made any sense. So moved on over.
Allentown, man, it's terrible, the traffic. There are a lot of stuff going on in Allentown, but construction always there. Traffic. So let's go back now. So much has changed, Lance. By the way, the first time I had you on, it was November 2018.
I hadn't even started working at the Buffalo News yet. Yeah, I was unpacking my apartment when we were recording, if I'm not mistaken.
In hindsight now, what was that transition like? Just being, you hear the term a lot of times, Lance was thrown in the fire. Well, Lance legitimately was.
It was challenging because I went straight from I had covered an entire baseball season. I was 150 plus games. I was the only one on the beat at the website I worked at. So to do that, then basically uproot your life and move to a city I had never been to other than my job interview was a big transition. And then jumping into the middle of a season, but it was fun. I mean, you eventually sort of, get your legs under you a little bit.
How long did it take? What was that process like?
It was a couple of years. I know it amazes me how some people in the business change beats, change jobs, relocate, because so much time and effort goes into developing relationships, we use the word brand now in reporting, and that's essentially what it is, right? Like your name, your reputation is everything in the business, and that respect isn't earned overnight. That's something I've always taken seriously, and you got to put the work in to get to where you're at.
I've asked you this previously on the podcast, but again, it's been a while since I've had you on.
Of course.
Man. And, at the time you mentioned this, you were coming over from the baseball beat to cover hockey. And, again, putting some perspective on it now, because you've been at this covering the Sabres now for, you're going to be going into your 5th season with the team. What's that process been? How long did it take you to really get up to speed and get comfortable? Not just another team, even if it was the same sport, just go to another team.
I hear you.
In itself is a process, but also another sport.
Probably not until my first season ended, because then I covered a coaching firing. The Sabres let Phil Housley go.
Yeah.
You sort of just experience everything until you do something once. There's always some sort of discomfort, and that includes the draft, which I'll be going to next week. Like my first draft is kind of a whirlwind because you're going one thing, you're other. Now you know where You know where you're at. You know where all these arenas are around the league. You know the players. You know how each beat that you cover, college, professional, even high school sports, there's a rhythm to it in terms of your reporting, your writing, and that's not easy to get a feel for. So it's all about taking your time. And yeah, I would say not until that 2019-20 season, and then COVID hit.
What about developing relationships with players and the organization and building sources? And let me stop this right here. I'm actually going to give you some credit, and I'm not saying this because you're on my show. I truly mean this, Lance. I'm serious. There's not a lot in this market, and I would maybe just local markets generally nowadays, whether it's football and hockey, because those are the two sports that I pay attention to the most, and then I'm locked in.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 times, especially in football, when you hear news break, something happens with the local team. 90% of the time, that comes from national. It's national media reports this. Adam Schefter reports this. Ian Rappaport on the football side reports this. You don't get a lot of breaking, or not even necessarily breaking, but source stories locally.
Yeah, it's the nature of the NFL, right? They hand everything to their national people.
They do. You on the hockey side, and I'm telling you this, I've talked to people. It's noticeable. You break. No, I hate using that word break. You develop a lot of stories. You put a lot of stories out that are based on sources.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of that in this market. Quite frankly, on the hockey side. And that's no disrespect to any reporter out there. There's a lot of great reporting out there. But you get source information a lot. I noticed that a lot more than everyone else. Is that part of like being here longer now and starting to develop more relationships?
Absolutely. And people, I've always approached the job, and relationships matter. How you speak to people matters. One of the first things I tried to do on this job is to write about as many people within not only this organization, but I would find excuses to call people around the league, whether it be agents, whether it be analysts, somebody like Brian Burke, who ended up going on and working in the NHL for the Penguins again. So then if you have a question, you need insight, you can always go back to these people. And if you do the job the right way, people are going to notice. And that's doing the job the right way both ways. It's not being super positive or trying to paint a rosy picture, because it hasn't been rosy. It's just doing the job the right way, and then knowing how to, use those relationships, and really just, people know that if they're going to give me something, I'm not going to burn them. And that's a big deal. Yeah. Trust. You develop trust. Yeah. So I appreciate you noticing that. Thank you.
Trust me, I do notice it. It is impressive. And another thing besides, like I said, you come into this market, covering baseball, coming to hockey. I could sit here and I could talk about Buffalo all day, South Buffalo. I said Imperial Pizza, all the great people here. You're not from this area. You didn't grow up here.
No.
Youngstown, Ohio, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
right?
I grew up watching a lot of Pittsburgh Penguins hockey, but a lot of the Penguins games I would watch coincidentally. It just always seems like a lot of my memories, playoff games, they were playing the Sabres, which is hilarious to look back on.
Let me ask you this, and it's kind of off topic a little bit.
No, that's good.
We're going to talk some Sabres, and by the way, this is Talking Buffalo. This is a Maintenance Day podcast with Lance Lysowski, my man Joe Yurden. Not just going to talk hockey here. We'll talk some hockey, of course. But I ask you this because today, so I grew up on the west side of Buffalo, near North Buffalo.
Yep.
I've lived in Florida, but like most of my adult life, I've lived out in the suburbs, Lackawanna Park. I pretty much have lived all over. The neighborhood I grew up in, I haven't lived there in 25, 30 years. Anyway, every now and then when I'm on the west side or North Buffalo, I make it a point to always drive up the street that I grew up on. And I did that like today. I like sometimes I'll just drive on the street I grew up on right in front of my house. I'll pull my car over. Sometimes I'll sit in my car for 5-10 minutes, look at the street, envision being a kid playing football and floor hockey in the street, looking at my house. My dad has been gone for many, many years. It just triggers memories with me. It's like a connection I feel when I go back and I visit the street that I grew up on. I guess what I'm asking you is, you've been in Buffalo now for a while. You were in Pittsburgh. Do you still feel, I'm sure you don't get to get home now. Like I said, for me,
I don't.
I'm talking about this with me.
Yeah.
That's 20-minute drive to go there. There's more than 20 minutes for you to get back home. But do you feel like a hometown connection still, whether you live there or not?
What do you mean, a hometown connection to where I grew up?
Do you miss where you grew up? Like, as an
No,
adult
I
now?
don't. The thing is, my parents have been a while. I don't have extended family from where
Sure.
still even living there. So now I go to Columbus, Ohio. My mom lives there. My brother lives in Dallas. Like, everyone just kind of spread out.
Yeah.
So really, Buffalo is my home now. I've been here for 5 years. So
you're a Buffalonian.
Yeah. I mean, I get back. I see friends every once in a while, but I guess ever since the pandemic, I don't really go back as often, because once the hockey restarted, it really hasn't stopped. Rochester's playoff runs, then it goes into the draft.
You've been busy.
Yeah. But it's good, right?
It's been a nice run, and
it's a lot easier to stay busy than to get that break and then get going again. I always find that challenging.
Let me ask you about Man of State podcast. I talk to Joe all the time about this, and it's always Joe. I like to get his perspective.
Yeah, of course.
For people watching or listening to the show right now, Lance and Joe have Maintenance Day podcast. It's an excellent show. You guys, it's almost weekly. It's not always weekly, but for the most part.
We were on a good run there for almost a year. And then,
it gets hard. It gets hard to do. But you guys still do it. You still put out great content. Just talk about that podcast, kind of how it started, the premise of it. You enjoy doing it. Now, I remember talking to you, I believe it might have been at Beltline, which was, I think that was in August of 2021. So probably almost 2 years ago. But I remember talking to you, and at the time you hadn't had a podcast yet. And I remember you talking about there are
some really good, I don't want to say, I guess I'll say non-traditional media podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people who do really good work in this town who aren't credentialed, who aren't around the team every day.
Sure.
Whereas like Joe and I, we're around it. So why not try to use, that different insight, that different perspective, to sort of get our voices out there and just sort of have fun with it. That's what it is. If it starts to feel like a grind, then why do it?
This is no disrespect at all to anybody. And you mentioned it, there's good content creators out there on the Sabres side, on the Bill side, who aren't credentialed. That doesn't mean that they don't have good respect and they don't have good views. Some of them are actually great. But, and I'm one of them, there's a difference when you cover a team. When you are in there, and I've talked to Joe about this, and Joe's been quite open about it, because Joe, for a while, before he started Notre Hockey, he started working for Bleacher Report, he wasn't at all the games. Like this year, he covered the team full time.
Yep.
And he talked about it. It's a different perspective when you are in that locker room and developing relationships with players or seeing firsthand with your own eyes and your own ears the vibe, the temperature of the room and everything that goes on. That helps you do your job. And not even if so much better, although I do think it's better, but it's also differently as well.
Yeah, of course. You have more context, and that goes down to every detail, lineups, what the team could do trade-wise, what this player is like, what this guy's going through. And I guess I kind of forgot about the importance or the massive difference during COVID. Everything was over Zoom. It was really, that was the season where they lost 18 games in a row. It's not that it was miserable by any means. It was a different job.
Was it harder? Was it hard to do your job that way?
It absolutely was.
Not being able to ask all the follow-ups or go work.
You had to use your phone a lot more. You had to call extra people. For example, when Jeff Skinner was a healthy scratch, he got put on the taxi squad, and you couldn't go talk to Jeff Skinner about it. The coach can be elusive because he's on a Zoom call. You can't get multiple questions in, so you call the agent. And then the agent happens to tell you that, I just called the GM and I told him we're not happy about it. And then you get a story there, right? And then you get a lot more information. So you have to go about it. And it's not like you lose that in a normal year, but you have to be a lot more creative and a lot more open-minded on how you're going to get your stories.
Obviously, the Sabres are in a much better place now than they were.
To say the least.
Even the last time I had you, or live at Beltline when we did it show a couple years ago, and obviously years before that, they're in a better place. Still, they haven't proven enough.
They're not there yet.
They're
not there.
They're showing a lot more potential.
Yeah,
for sure. What I'm asking you is talk about the change that you see, maybe in fans, maybe in the players, maybe in people within the organization when it comes to just the temperature of that room. Say even over the last couple of years, just the feeling that fans feel about this team now compared to maybe when you first started covering.
Yeah, I'll speak to the room. It's interesting because even last year, there were still some COVID protocols in the league, so we weren't in the locker room until this past season. So it was 2 seasons without being in there, and we had heard about, oh, there's a change. There's a good thing going. The team would post some things to social media. I think of the Heritage Classic when the guy's boarding the bus wearing those, the Will Ferrell outfits or whatever, the basketball uniforms, if you remember correctly. Yeah. But you couldn't use examples. You couldn't really speak to it. Whereas now you're in it every day and you notice, and I can go back and I can compare it to 2019-20, when Eichel was the captain. You had Reinhart there and Ristolainen, and it's a night and day difference from that perspective. Just how the players interact with each other. It's just a lot more loose. And I used to go in other locker rooms around the league because you're talking to different players, getting different stories. I remember going into like the Penguins locker room, the Blackhawks locker room, and thinking it's almost like I cover a minor league team compared to this, because these guys, it looks like a professional locker room, whereas the Sabres, it's like, do these guys even like each other?
Yeah.
And then it's when everything changed, they got rid of guys. You started to hear more and more, not only from people within the organization and management, but also former players, about how it was and how it wasn't a very good atmosphere. So it's a night and day difference. And I think when it comes to the fans, all they care about is winning. And now that there are signs of progress, you're starting to see them come around. I think there was a lot of, there was cautious optimism. I'm sure there still is to a very severe extent, but they don't want to be hurt again because they've been hurt quite a bit over the last decade plus, right?
Couldn't agree with you more when you say it's about the fans just wanting them to see them win. But I would even go as far as to say they just wanted to be entertaining, fun brand of hockey. You spend your money, you go to the arena, you want to be entertained, you want to have a good night out. And it was a long time for me, it seems like, anyway. So I ain't going to lie to you, Lance. I wasn't one of those dudes shelling out money to go to the
well, I don't blame you on a lot of those nights.
It didn't seem like it almost felt like punishment, like I'm obligated to root for this team because they're my hometown team. At that time, that's how it was starting to feel,
I get it. It's not cheap to go see a sporting event, right? We have to choose wisely on how we spend our money. And, I think a big piece of it is, I think this fan base is at the point they want to win, right? Yeah. So I am very curious to see how they react with how heightened the expectations are going to be next season, when this group is going to be expected not just to show progress, but to be a playoff team.
Yeah, when I have Joe on, he says that at this point, the expectation should be the playoffs for fans. Speaking of Joe, too, this is a question I like to ask him, and I want to ask you this, and I'll have you on the show. In the locker room, like, who are one or two of your favorite players to cover? Not necessarily like one or two of the best guys on the team. I'm just saying, like, one or two guys that, like, you enjoy having a rapport with, someone, whether it's for a story or just when
it comes to insight, how helpful they can be, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Number one on my list is Matthias Samuelsson, who might be, he's one of the more unique personalities I've covered in any line. Yeah. In my decade in the business, he is like everything you see, like, yeah, he's just a hilarious person. He's not afraid to speak his mind. He gives great insight, because some guys, they'll give you a quote and it's just surface level stuff, but he actually, like, you learn something every time you have a conversation with him, and you'll also laugh, which I can't ask for anything more. And then my number two would be a difficult pick. I love talking to Darlene now. He's gotten so good.
How much has he changed over the last couple of years?
It's night and day. And I think a big part of it is now he feels like he can speak up and he can show his personality, which is the case with a lot of guys. Before, they were basically taught not to talk. They were told not to talk to the media by some of their teammates. That's no longer the culture there. So they've opened up a little bit more. Tuck's great. Like, Alex Tuck is just a great, again, perspective, insight, understands, like, the job that we do. Kyle Okposo. I mean, there's so many guys on the team. It's really impressive how far the entire group has come, even the guys who are holdovers.
You're a reporter, so it's different for you. You're covering a team. As a fan, a couple of years ago when Kevin Adams was at the podium and he was talking about, I want guys who want to be here. I felt like, as a fan, I'm just rolling my eyes at that. First of all, like, who wants to be here? They have no choice if they're here. But you're starting to feel like with this team, from what I see and a lot of people see, this is a team in a locker room full of guys that do want to be here.
Yeah, I think that players in any professional sports league at some point learn the very harsh lesson that a lot of guys, the grass isn't always greener on the other side.
Right.
And I think that, Eichel and Reinhart, it's worked out for them. You look at Ristolainen. He thought that he was going to go and it was going to be great, and he's stuck in another rebuild with no end in sight, right? And I think all these guys, and adding Tuck is a big part of it, because Tuck can say, here's what it used to be like.
Yeah.
And once you build a real team and the guys in that room see how much talent has been accumulated, and they see the progress, and they have a coach who is teaching a style, is coaching them in a way that they feel brings out their strength, you're going to have a buy-in that wasn't there previously. I think that, we can simplify what went wrong with that organization, but the fact of the matter is a lot went wrong on multiple levels to get them to where they were when Kevin Adams had to basically implode it again and start to decide, here's who I'm building around.
I am here live at Imperial Pizza in South Buffalo with Buffalo Sabres beat reporter Lance Lysowski of the Buffalo News. I have to ask you about Alexander McGillney. Did not get in the Hockey Hall of Fame again. Is at this point, is he ever going to get in? Pierre Turgeon gets in. Tom Barrasso gets in, 2 former Sabres. McGillney doesn't. It just...
Mike Harrington has written quite a bit about this. There's 2 obvious factors that are in play here that Mike's written about for the past couple of years, actually. It's not only the war in Ukraine, which is going to prevent McGillney from coming over and being part of the ceremony, which is very important to the committee.
Yeah.
But even before the war, McGillney said that he wasn't necessarily interested in coming over if there were a ceremony. And that doesn't sit well. Now, I understand... them maybe having some concerns in that area, but it is the Hall of Fame. You put the best players in my opinion. And that guy, not only what he did on the ice, but how much of a trailblazer he was off the ice to maybe give some guys courage to think, I'm going to be bold and come over, because he started a wave of players who came over after the fact, and it really opened the door to what this league has become. Right? If you exclude all the Russian players or Eastern European players to a certain extent, the talent level isn't what it is. It's mind-boggling. And the fact that there's no transparency in the process is what is even worse about
Right. I'd rather someone come out and say why they're not putting them in. It can't be.
There should be
everything you said.
There should be a thorough explanation, because if it is the factors, if that's what it is, say it.
I can understand. I agree with you too. I can understand it to an extent. Well, we don't want to put this guy in the hall. He's not even going to show up for it. Or
we want to wait until we can persuade him, or he can come. I get that, but find another way to celebrate him in the future. Just put the best Hall of Fame class in.
I can't agree more. It's not like he's done a bunch of illegal things. It's like he's a rotten human being. Then that would be why you'd want to keep him out of the hall.
You have the debate in baseball about steroids. That's not the case here.
Were you a little surprised moving him aside? Which, by the way, I don't want to be completely disrespectful to Pierre Turgeon and
course.
Tom Barrasso. Congratulations on both of them getting into the hall. Obviously that's probably one of their biggest dreams of their life, and you could
tell how surprised they were with some of their comments.
Yeah. And Sabres fans should celebrate them too, and not just make it all about McGillney not getting in. But all that said, are you a little bit surprised that one or both of them did get in?
I am surprised, absolutely, because you look at 3 goalies got in. That doesn't happen. There's not many goalies in the Hall of Fame, and there were, I would argue, a couple of more qualified goalies.
Sure.
Especially if we're talking about Ryan Miller's future candidacy. I know Barrasso won a couple of cups, but go look at those Pittsburgh Penguins rosters. I think it makes sense why they won a couple of cups, right? So, hey, I don't want to put down anyone's resume. The frustrating part for me is not only McGillney, but only one woman. There's so many women players who have deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, and we're going to put a cap on how many can get in, but we're just going to – the whole process needs to be reevaluated. The same goes for baseball, but, hey, these people who make these decisions, there's no accountability and there's no transparency.
By the way, again, we're live here outside. If you missed the top of the show, usually I'm in a booth at Imperial, but it's the second day of summer or first day of summer. I don't know what. Second day of summer. It's beautiful out. Abbey Road is overlooking us. Might have a couple motorcycles or something go by, but who gives a shit at this point, man? It's nice. It's comfortable out here. I'm with Lance. All right, so let's talk a few minutes about the Sabres before I let you go anyway. Zegnas Girgensson and Kyle Okposo both resign. Okposo, I don't consider that as much as a fan as a surprise. Girgensson, it kind of felt like he had earned the right maybe to test free agency and see what might have been out there. But and you wrote about this week, which, by the way, I love your mailbag. By the way.
Thank you.
That's just old school and it's fun. Jay does it too on the football side sometimes. I like an old school mailbag.
I appreciate that.
I like fans.
Always going to get feedback on something like that.
Yeah, it's good to have fans ask you questions.
Yeah.
And you can give them more detailed answers than you can just say on Twitter. So anyway, that aside, but you wrote kind of about like some scenarios that you thought could happen if they lost Girgensson. As it turns out, he doesn't even hit free agency. Did that surprise you?
This is just to start speculation. I do wonder if the agent got okay, here are the teams that would offer you multiple years. Do you want to relocate? Right? Like, It's tough. You finally have comfort. You're finally on a team that's on the cusp of winning. Do you really want to risk starting over at a place where you're not as good of a spot? They offered him $2.5 million in 1 year. That's a good number. They wanted him back. He fit perfect. Like, he fits well. He has a role here. So in the end, unless there was going to be the right fit on multiple years, I guess it makes sense. So the Sabres, I know they're relieved because if he walked, they didn't want to give term to anybody who was going to fill that role. They were going to have to go through free agency, but the players with his skill set, they're getting multiple years. Mm-hmm. So you're in a pretty difficult predicament because you can't just bring up a prospect from Rochester. It's not going to be. It's a different type of player. Jurgensen's is that he plays a heavier game that they need. You can't be all skill through your four lines.
Here's a question that a reporter who covers the team could maybe understand more so than a podcaster or a blogger or just a fan of the team. You kind of hit on this a little bit too. Ultimately, it's about money. It's always about money and winning. That matters. But also, when you get to know these players, at least a little bit anyway, personally, maybe a little bit, obviously professionally, maybe a little bit personally, but like you just mentioned, relocating. Some guys, that factors into decisions, doesn't it? Somebody's happy in the town that they're in, where they live. Stuff like that matters too. People don't think about that sometimes.
Yeah, for an example, I thought if the Pittsburgh Penguins were interested, I thought maybe Girgensons would test the market to see if that could be a possibility because he and his wife live in Pittsburgh in the offseason. She's from there. They spend a lot of time there. He trains there in the offseason because they have a facility there. So that's just an example. I mean, again, the grass isn't always greener. And the guy's put in 10 years, 10 plus years into this organization. He's gone through a lot. You want to see it through, right?
Yeah. When it comes to Okposo, was that expected?
Yeah. I mean, as much as he made a couple of comments during locker cleanout that raised the eyebrows and maybe made people wonder, is retirement an option for him? I think he always planned on comeback, and he's doing it 1 year at a time. He's not committing to playing beyond next season, but he feels like, and he showed through his play, he can excel in that role and he can help this team win. We'll see how it plays out, but I don't blame them. I mean, Girgensons, Okposo, and Peyton Krebs, they were one of the top defensive lines in hockey last year, and you need a group like that who could play shutdown hockey. It's just they need more offense from that trio, and those three guys know that they do.
I hate to ask you to speculate on something, but that's pretty much what I'm going to do right now.
That's fine.
Do you think
to
he's still,
an extent,
with him being back, is he the captain for another year?
He's absolutely the captain for another year. Yeah. So? He's the captain as long as he's on that team and in that locker room, and he's earned that right with the way the role that he's played. And you know what? Between, again, like during the COVID years when we weren't in the room, you heard about his impact. But once you actually see it and you see the interactions, you see how other guys talk about him, you see the subtleties behind the scenes, it makes all the sense in the world why they would want him back.
From an outsider perspective, he just feels like a really authentic human being.
Yes. Teaches those young players to know the security guards' names in the arena, how to be a pro, and having an example like that matters. And it's also important to not put the C on someone's jersey too soon, right? They did it to Eichel, and I'm not saying that doing that with somebody like just Dahlin, for example, would be catastrophic, because I don't think it would be, but let them just play their game. Let Alex Tuch focus on getting this team to the playoffs. And when it's time, it's time. But there's no reason to rush it, because right now they have the perfect person to fill that role.
Okposo and Girgensson, two guys we were just talking about here, they remind me of a lot of like there's a lot of former Sabres who played here for a long time.
Yeah.
They're always welcome back in this town. They're popular guys now. I see those guys as being two of them.
Yeah,
for future years.
And you see how hard they practice, and you can tell when guys don't practice hard. I saw quite a few of them on the previous teams that I covered here. No, like those guys are at it every day, and they set the work rate, and everybody else has to match it, or you're gonna sink, right? Like and you need veterans like that.
There's a couple big stories as we head into again a busy time for you for the league. You got the draft coming up, you got free agency coming up. The Sabres have two key defensemen right now, young defensemen, Dahlin and Power. Lots of buzz about one or both of them possibly getting deals done sooner than later. Do you think it's extremely realistic without, at this point guessing if it's going to happen? But do you think something can happen soon with one or both?
They can sign their extensions on July 1st.
Yeah.
I expect Dahlin's to get done on July 1st or shortly thereafter.
Okay.
Powers is the interesting one because if you're him, why would you sign long-term right now?
Bridge deal, you think?
That's what makes the most sense from the player's perspective. He's going to put up more points in the next couple of seasons. Like the second power play unit for the Sabres this year, it was just too young. Not only did you have Power learning how to quarterback a power play in the NHL, which is far different than Michigan, you had J.J. Peterka and Jack Quinn, and penalty kills nowadays, they're not passive. They're not going to just let young guys shoot the puck like they can in the American League. They pressure you into mistakes, and both those kids found out the hard way. So I think that group is going to take a big step, and with that's going to come more production offensively for Power, and that means more money.
You wrote about this in your mailbag.
Yeah.
For people who might not have had a chance to read that yet, and by the way, if you haven't, go check it out. What would be a ideal bridge contract ballpark where you can see Power doing something if he does go that route?
So when it comes to contract comparables, I always reach out to Cap Friendly, like the guys who work there, the people who work there. And they suggested a few. The one that's obvious is the same contract that Dahlin signed as his bridge, 3 years times 6.
Okay.
It could be a little bit higher than that, but that's sort of the baseline. We'll see, because like you look at the ice time, you look at the responsibility the Power had as a rookie. We haven't seen anything like that in the past 15 years. A young guy come in the league and just play 24 minutes a night. It doesn't happen. He did it at a high level.
This is going to be kind of a blanketed question, but when we were eating our wings before the show, when I was eating my wings before the show, me and
Don't
Jeff,
make me
Josh
jealous.
and I
Come
were
on.
eating our wings before the show, Lance was watching us enjoying. But you brought up a point that just makes a lot of sense. I'd like for you to elaborate on it a little bit. The Sabres are probably not going to invest a lot of money in goaltender over the summer because you think that if they're going to make their big investment, that it would be getting another defenseman. Kind of elaborate on that a little bit. And also, I wanted you to hit on a guy that you talked a lot about in your mailbag. So for people listening or watching.
So you look at the options they're going to have to upgrade their defense, Pat, and the trade option is the most obvious for the Sabres because you don't have to acquire. Free agency's tough. Those guys want more money. They want term. And Buffalo's long-term salary cap picture, it's going to be challenging to pull something like that off. So the two options, the one I wrote about that I think is going to be the focus of everybody when it comes to the Sabres is Brett Pesce from the Carolina Hurricanes. Yeah. Jason Carmanos, the Sabres associate general manager, was in Carolina when Pesce was drafted. Don Granato was at the USA National Development Program when Pesce was there. There's relationships. He's a perfect fit to play next to Power or Dahlin. He's entering the last year of his contract, though. So even if he had term, Pat, they're going to have to give up probably a first-round pick plus to do that. They're not going to do that plus trade assets to get a goalie. Right. It's just too much. They're at the point where they want to upgrade. They're going to be more aggressive. They're open to that sort of a move much more now than they were a year ago, but you got to be careful not to deplete your prospect depth while doing it. So as much as I know that Kevin Adams is calling around on goalies, Connor Hellebuck's going to cost too much, and he's a rental. You can't do that and upgrade your defense. Jonas Korpisalo, free agent, is going to want term. Freddie Anderson's supposedly going back to Carolina. Semyon Varlamov supposedly going back to the Islanders. Thatcher Demko, who had been at the top of my list in Vancouver, isn't available. So there's not a whole lot out there in terms of real upgrades. They believe in Devin Levi so much that That's why they don't want to block him. And Pat, they're going to have to pay that kid soon. If he plays 40 games this year and he plays the way they think he's going to be making $5 million a year and not very long. So, they'll try. But in the end, I think that there is a confidence internally that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's going to benefit from having competition. He didn't have that last year with Eric Comrie and Craig Anderson. Now, if he's not showing up and competing against Devin Levi, you're going to sink.
You also hit on it a little bit when we were chit-chatting before the show and eating that a goalie coming here it might not be the most desirable thing for a goalie to want to come here. Not because the team stinks like it has for so many years, but because of the position.
You're going to get run support, but you also know the way that the team plays. If you're entering the final year of your contract, Pat, or you only sign a 1-year deal, you might be nervous that your numbers might not look all that great a year from now.
Right.
And hey, that's a fair concern, but the Sabres, and that's what I think ultimately is going to lead the Sabres to think and bet that the improved defense, a more responsible approach with the puck, because turnovers were the killer for them, really. It wasn't D-zone coverage, it was turnovers. And their forwards need to be better in D-zone coverage. Like, their forwards weren't getting back as much for most of the season. Look at how this team played when Devin Levi was in goal.
Yeah.
They defended. They protected the puck. Like, that's how they need to play next season, regardless of who's in net. And they think if they play that way with Luukkonen, they're going to be okay.
Winding down here with Lance Lysowski of the Buffalo News on a nice, comfortable summer night here at Imperial Pizza. Why didn't Olofsson, or why hasn't he? I shouldn't say didn't because I can't talk about him past tense. Not yet anyway, for sure. Why doesn't it work out better with him? This guy is such a streaky player. He looks so good at times, and then it's like a disappearing act.
The NHL is all about roles. So you need, if for a player like Olofsson, who's not going to be a presence on the forecheck, who's deficient defensively, he needs to be in a situation that's going to bring out his strengths. His 5-on-5 game took a step back this year. His playmaking took a step back, which was surprising because he was healthy. The previous year when he was injured, he became a better playmaker. He took steps 5-on-5. I think the frustration got to him. I think not being on the first power play got to him. He didn't get into a rhythm. And although he scored 28 goals, how many were empty netters? How many were in inconsequential situations? Right now, with where this team is at, where the Sabres are at, they've got Jack Quinn, they got JJ Peterka, Yuri Kulik's ready to push for a spot. They don't need that shot in the power play like other teams do, and they're going to be able to get something in return. I know fans have soured on the player.
Right.
And they think that, well, who's going to give up? Look at his plus minus. Look how bad he is defensively. He's still scored 28 goals, and there's a lot of teams that need goal scorers on the power play. They're going to find a home for, they're going to find a fit. And the thing about Olofsson, too, I don't think that they dislike, he's entering the last year of his contract, and they have players who you can plug in and give you comparable or even better, production, not only on the power play, but 5-on-5.
You mentioned Kulik. Would it be a surprise to you at this point if he's not with Buffalo this year?
No, I don't think so. I think he's going to have to earn a spot. And part of the reason why I wouldn't be surprised is the Matt Savoy factor. What are they going to do with Matt Savoy? He's not going to benefit from playing an entire season in junior. So they could do the Shane Wright plan, which Seattle deployed, carry him on your NHL roster at the start of the year, and then make him eligible for a conditioning assignment in the American League. He can get several games in Rochester and then send him to junior. And then at that point, you could bring somebody like Kulik up if he didn't have a stronger training camp, right? So they've got some options here to actually create competition in training camp, because that's what they want. They want internal competition, because for so long in this organization, they didn't have that.
Last question here. There's the NHL drafts coming up. You're going to Nashville. So sorry that you have to go to Nashville, by the way. What a terrible thing that you got to do to go cover the draft. But anyway, a lot of Sabres fans. Hockey's not like football. Well plugged in Sabres fans are going to know a lot of these prospects. In football, even more casual fans, just because it's on ESPN and so much to consume when it comes to draft prospects. The average Bills fan probably knows a good 10 to 15 prospects. I don't think that's the case with the average Sabres fan anyway. But for casual Sabres fans who are watching or listening to this show right now, I mean, not necessarily specific players, but what are a couple things that Sabres fans should be plugged into most when it comes to this draft and how it might play out?
Potential trades, that's always the big one. This is a lot of business gets done this coming week. All the general managers are in town. There's draft. People want to get picks in this draft because how strong it's. This is considered one of the best drafts we've had since the McDavid Eichel year, right? Or
really?
if not the best.
Oh wow!
Especially with how deep the forward group is in the first round. So with Buffalo, it's whether they go defenseman or forward in the first. They're going to have really good players to pick from, and 13th overall is a really good pick to have in this one. As much as I know they're calling around to see what they could get by trading back, I think ultimately they're going to make their pick. If it's a forward, I think Oliver Moore makes a lot of sense. If it's a defenseman, Dmitry Simishev, Russian.
If all things equal, you would expect it to be a defensive player. Now, I know they're going to take the best.
Not necessarily. I don't think in the NHL, I think organizations have different philosophies, but best player available. And it's who's going to be the best NHL player, because eventually we know they're not going to be able to sign everybody. You go look at the pipeline and think they have this, this, and this, but an injury can happen next week that completely sidetracks a guy and either delays his timeline to getting to Buffalo or he never gets here at all. So you got to protect yourself, and you can never have too much talent. It's a good problem to have.
Well, it's going to be fun to watch. It is fun to keep up with you, fun to chat with you here tonight, fun to follow your work on the Buffalo News again.
Always a pleasure, Pat. Thanks for having me.
I mean it. You really do a great job.
I appreciate it. I know.
I truly mean it. So thank you very much, Lance.
Appreciate it.
Thank you again one last time. Imperial Pizza, 1035 Avenue in South Buffalo. Great food. Come check it out. Good vibes. Yeah, man. Thanks, buddy. And be back with a new show.
Can't wait.
Next Monday. Talk to you then.